Hello humans! Today I'm going to teach you about the return keyword and we'll go over how scope works in Python. Return is used when you want your function to stop running. It can also make your function output data, but we'll get to that. Let's make a function myBar and it's going to ask what your age is. We'll greet you regardless of your age, but if you're 21 or older, we will ask if you want to come into the bar. We could accomplish this with an if statement, but let's use return instead. Before we invite you to the bar, we ask if age is less than 21. If so, then we return. Let's call our function and say our age is 30. After this, I'll print see ya. Running this, I see that we are greeted and invited into the bar. Our function stops running and see ya gets printed. If I change our age to 17, then when I run this, I only see the initial greeting and see ya. This is because our age is less than 21, so return executed, which stopped our function. When a function stops, the remaining code below the return statement doesn't run. Instead, Python skips to the line of code that follows the function call, which is printing see ya in this case. Return can also be used to make functions output data when they stop running. Let's say our function doubleMyNumber asks for a number and will then calculate what that number times 2 is. To be able to store the results, we need to return the calculation and create a variable to store them. We'll start in our function. We need to say return followed by the value we want to store. In our case, we'll say doubled number is equal to number times 2, then we'll return doubled number. To store this, we create myReturnedValue and set it equal to the function call for doubleMyNumber. We'll set 5 as our argument and print myReturnedValue. Running this, we see 10 print out, so let's break down what happened. We created a variable to store the result of the function doubleMyNumber. The number we are doubling is 5, so number gets set equal to that. We then calculate that doubled number is equal to 5 times 2, which is 10. We then return doubled number. This makes the function doubleMyNumber stop and set itself equal to the returned value, which is 10. Now, when we say myReturnedValue is equal to doubleMyNumber, we are effectively saying that myReturnedValue is equal to 10, and that's why we see the 10 in our console. Now, you may be thinking, why even create myReturnedValue? Why not just print double number directly and skip over all of the return nonsense? We did this because printing doubled number outside of our function doesn't actually work. It gives us an error and says that doubled number is not defined. This is because of scope. Consider this. I have two Python files, file1.py and file2.py. In file 1, I create favorite food and set it equal to sushi. In file 2, I create a variable with the same name, favorite food, but this time I set it equal to potatoes. Will this overwrite sushi in file 1? No, it won't overwrite it because variables are not shared between files. Separate files have different scopes. If I created both variables in file 1, then my second value would overwrite the first. This is because both variables would be within the same scope. Python applies the same concept to functions. Variables you create in a function cannot be used outside of that function. These variables are in a scope of their own, which cannot be accessed outside of the function that they're defined in. Python does this because it would be too easy to accidentally reuse a variable name from a function within the main body of your code. Doing so would overwrite your variable, which would likely cause errors. This is why we have return. If we need to get a variable out of a function, then we return that variable. If you need multiple variables brought out, then you can create a list with all of the values and return that list. Regardless, this might seem annoying when you're new to programming, but once you start working on big projects with thousands of lines of code, you'll be happy that scope exists. To wrap up this tutorial, we'll go over some vocabulary. When we create a variable within a function, we call this a local variable. This variable can only be used within the local body of code. the function it was defined in. Variables that we define outside of functions are called global variables. These can be used anywhere you want within your Python file, even inside functions. Now, if you need to use a global variable inside a function, you should request the information as a parameter to the function. Doing so will make your life a lot easier when importing functions later on in your career. Regardless, we aren't covering imports in this series, so we can get to that later. Today we went over the keyword return and scope in Python. A big thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing. Comment below with suggestions for future videos, and I will see you in the next one.